My mother-in-law forced my girlfriend to cheat on me with a rich man. I was going to propose that Christmas with a $3,000 ring. But her sister showed me the pregnancy test and revealed the baby wasn't mine. Now, 5 years later, the mother-in-law shows up at my job claiming I'm the father, and her husband is finally divorcing her. I'm 28 years old, work at a factory doing shifts that sometimes leave me more dead than alive. And I need to tell this story because recently, my ex's mother showed up at my workplace, making a huge scene, and I think she finally reached the point where her own husband is considering divorcing her. The thing is, all this drama started like 5 years ago, on what should have been the best Christmas of my life but ended up being the worst, and apparently this woman still can't get over it. I guess I should start at the beginning. When I met Heather in 2015, we were in college. I was 19, and she was too. And we met at one of those typical dorm parties where the music is too loud and the beer too cheap. You know how it is. Heather was pretty, like really pretty, with this long brown hair and a smile that literally lit up the room. I'm not exaggerating. We started talking that night and connected immediately. We talked about everything, about our majors, about music, about how much we hated, the cafeteria food. And when I realized it was already 3 in the morning, and we were still sitting there on the stairs outside the building. We started dating officially like a week later, and were basically together from then on, or at least that's what I thought. The relationship was good. I mean, we had our problems like all couples, but nothing major. Small fights over silly things that we'd forget the next day. She was studying nursing and I was doing engineering, though I eventually dropped engineering because, honestly, it wasn't for me, and ended up getting the factory job, but that was later. The point is, we spent a lot of time together, studied together at the library, went to the movies on Fridays, all that normal college couple stuff. Her friends were my friends. My friends were her friends. We had built this life together that seemed pretty solid. But there was one problem, and that problem was named Beverly, Heather's mother. From the first day she introduced me to her family, Beverly looked at me like I had stepped in something disgusting and dragged it into her house. I don't know what it was, if it was because I'm black, or because I come from a neighborhood not as fancy as theirs, or simply because I had the audacity to date her daughter, but the woman hated me with a passion I had never seen. Every time I went to their house, which was often because Heather was very close to her family, Beverly found a way to make me feel uncomfortable. Passive-aggressive comments about my job, about my future, about whether I was really good enough for her daughter. Once, she even asked me in front of everyone at dinner if I planned to support Heather working at a factory for the rest of my life, as if my job was something I should be ashamed of. Heather's father, Brian, was the opposite. A calm and respectful guy who treated me well, asked me normal questions about sports or work, basically dad stuff. Heather's younger sister, Emily, was also great. She was like 17 when we met and was one of those super smart and funny girls who always had some sarcastic comment but in a good way. But Beverly, that woman looked at me like I was the Antichrist or something. Heather always minimized it, said her mom was like that with everyone, that I shouldn't take it personally. But I knew it wasn't true because I saw her be totally different with other people. Fast forward to 2019. We'd been together like 4 years by that point, living in separate apartments but basically spending all our free time together. I was already working full-time at the factory. Heather had graduated and was working as a nurse at a hospital, and things were going well. Or at least that's what I thought. I decided I wanted to propose to her at Christmas, like it was the perfect time. We'd been together long enough, we both had stable jobs, we were in our early 20s and it seemed like the logical next step. So I started picking up extra shifts at the factory. All the extra shifts I could get, working doubles and even triples some weekends, because I wanted to buy her a really nice ring, not something cheap that would look bad. I spent months saving every extra penny I had, and when I say every penny, I mean it literally. I stopped going out with my friends, stopped buying things for myself, ate as cheap as possible, all to be able to save up enough money for that ring. Finally, in November of that year, I managed to buy a ring that cost like $3,000, which for me at that time was a fortune. But it was worth it because I'd imagine it on her finger and get so excited I couldn't even sleep well. I had everything planned. I was going to propose at Christmas Eve dinner with her family. I had talked to Brian beforehand and he was excited, gave me his blessing and everything, even helped me plan how to do it to make it special. Emily also knew and was super excited. She'd text me all the time asking if I had proposed yet, telling me Heather was going to be so happy. The only problem was, Beverly didn't know. But honestly, I didn't care what she thought. I wasn't going to let her attitude ruin that moment for Heather and me. But it turns out things didn't go at all like I planned, not even close. Christmas Day came. I went to Heather's family house in the afternoon like we had agreed. I had the ring in my pocket and was nervous but excited, you know? That kind of good nerves where you feel like something amazing is about to happen. I knocked on the door and Emily was the one who opened it. But the moment I saw her, I knew something was wrong because her eyes were red like she had been crying. And when she saw me, her face completely fell apart. She grabbed my arm and pulled me aside before I could go in, and she said, "Marcus, I need to tell you something before you go inside." And I was like, "What's wrong? Is everything okay?" And she just pulled something out of her pocket, a pregnancy test, one of those with the two pink lines, and showed it to me. I said, "Emily, are you pregnant?" Because honestly, that was the only thing that made sense in my head. But she shook her head and said, "No, this is Heather's." And I just stood there like an idiot because I didn't understand what she was telling me. I mean, I understood the words, but my brain wasn't processing them correctly. I asked her, "Is Heather pregnant?" And she nodded. And I started to smile because I thought, well, this changes the plans, but it's not bad. I'm going to be a dad. This is great. But then Emily said something that basically destroyed my entire world. She said, "Marcus, the baby isn't yours. Heather has been seeing another guy. Mom introduced him to her like 6 months ago." And I swear to God, I felt like I had been hit in the stomach with a baseball bat. I literally couldn't breathe properly. I just stood there trying to process what I had just heard. I asked her what, and she started crying and explained everything to me. Told me that Beverly had introduced Heather to this guy who worked at some investment company or something, a guy with money that Beverly considered more appropriate for her daughter than me, and that basically Beverly had been pressuring Heather to stop seeing me and start dating this other guy. At first, Heather resisted, but eventually gave in and started seeing this guy behind my back, and now she was pregnant with his baby. Emily told me she had found out that same morning when she found the pregnancy test in the bathroom they shared, and when she confronted Heather, she confessed everything crying. I don't really remember what happened next. I think my brain went into autopilot mode or something, but I know I told Emily I was sorry, but I had to go. I turned around and left without even going into the house. I heard Emily yelling at me to wait, but I just kept walking to my car, got in and sat there for I don't know how long, just staring at the steering wheel and feeling how my whole life that I had built with this person was crumbling. I had the ring in my pocket, that ring I had worked so many extra hours for, and all I could think was how stupid I was. What an idiot for thinking she actually loved me. Eventually, I started the car and went to my apartment, and the first thing I did was block Heather's number on my phone, block her on all social media, basically erase her from my life completely. I changed my phone number like 2 days later, deleted all my social media because I didn't want her to be able to contact me in any way. And I told all our mutual friends that if she asked about me to please not tell her anything. Some of them asked me what had happened, but I didn't want to talk about it. I just told them things hadn't worked out and I needed space. The next few months were horrible. I'm not going to lie. I spent all my time working as much as I could so I wouldn't think about anything. I'd come home so tired I'd basically pass out in bed, and that way I avoided staying awake, thinking about the whole situation. My friends tried to get me out, make me be social again, but I wasn't ready. Everything still hurt too much. I sold the ring back to the jewelry store. Obviously didn't get all the money back but got something, and used that money to move to a better apartment in another part of town, like to have a fresh start. Sometime in mid-2020, like 6 months after the whole Christmas disaster, one of my friends who was still in contact with people from that social circle told me that the guy Heather had been with had bailed when he found out she was pregnant, like literally told her he wanted nothing to do with the baby and disappeared. Apparently Heather had had the baby, a boy, and was now a single mother living with her parents again because she couldn't afford her apartment alone. Part of me felt something hearing that, I'm not going to lie. But it wasn't satisfaction or anything like that. It was more like a mix of sadness and relief that I wasn't in that situation. But then things got weird because somehow Heather got my new number. I have no idea how, but she did, and started calling me. The first few times I didn't answer because I didn't want to talk to her. But she kept calling and leaving voicemails where she cried and asked for forgiveness, said she had made the worst mistake of her life, that I was the love of her life, and she couldn't believe how stupid she had been. Eventually, I answered one of her calls. Not because I wanted to forgive her, but because I thought maybe if I talked to her once and made it clear I didn't want anything to do with her, she'd finally leave me alone. The conversation was exactly what I expected. Her crying and apologizing, telling me her mom had manipulated her, that she never wanted to hurt me, that the other guy turned out to be a jerk who just used her and left her alone with a baby. And honestly, listening to her talk, all I felt was exhaustion, like all the emotion I ever had for her had completely evaporated. I told her, Heather, I appreciate you apologizing, but what happened can't be fixed. You made your choices and now you have to live with the consequences. I moved on and you should do the same. She started begging, saying we could try again, that she had changed, but I simply told her no. I wish you the best, but I don't want to be part of your life. Please don't contact me again. And I hung up. I thought that would be the end of it, but no, because then Beverly started texting me. I have no idea how she got my number, but she had it, and the messages were basically her calling me a coward, telling me it was my responsibility to help her daughter, that I had been part of Heather's life for years, and I couldn't just abandon her, now that things were tough. I responded with one message telling her that her daughter had cheated on me, and the baby wasn't mine, so I had no responsibility to either of them, and that if she kept harassing me, I'd have to take legal action, and I blocked her too. Things calmed down for a while after that. Like for a few months, I didn't hear from any of them and thought it had finally ended. But then, something happened that I never expected. It was Mother's Day last year, like 2023, and I had taken my mom to eat at Red Lobster because she loves that place. And when we're sitting there waiting for our food, guess who walks in? Beverly and Emily. Of all the people and all the possible places, they had to be there that day. Emily saw me first and her face lit up. She came running to our table and hugged me, and I hugged her back because I always liked Emily. She had nothing to do with the whole disaster. Beverly saw us from where she was, and her face got all tense, but Emily ignored her and sat with us for a moment to catch up. She asked me how I was, what I'd been doing, and I told her about my job and how I was finally feeling better about everything. She told me she was glad to see me doing well, and then said something that basically explained the whole damn mess. She said, Marcus, there's something you need to know about why Mom did what she did. And I was like, what? And she explained that apparently Beverly thought I was cheating on Heather with another girl. I just sat there like, what? Because I never cheated on Heather. Never. It didn't even cross my mind to do it. Emily told me Beverly had seen pictures of me on social media with my sister, Jasmine. And since Jasmine and I are close in age and spend a lot of time together, Beverly assumed she was my mistress or something. I told her, Emily, that's my sister, literal blood sister. And she covered her face with her hands and said, I know. I told her that when I finally found out about her crazy theory, but by that point the damage was already done. Turns out Beverly had used those pictures with Jasmine as justification to introduce Heather to the other guy, telling her that if I was cheating on her, she had every right to see other people too. And Heather, instead of just asking me about the pictures or confronting me directly, decided to believe her mom and start seeing the other guy in secret. This whole damn situation, my broken heart, the ruined Christmas, months of depression, everything had been because Beverly saw pictures of me with my sister and assumed the worst. I felt so angry hearing that I literally felt like my head was going to explode. But there was also a part of me thinking, what kind of person thinks their boyfriend is cheating, and instead of talking to him, just decides to cheat back, you know? Emily apologized like 1,000 times for what had happened, said she always knew I wasn't that kind of person. But nobody listened to the younger sister. Beverly eventually came to our table and tried to be polite in front of my mom, but I didn't even look at her, just kept talking to Emily like Beverly didn't exist, which clearly bothered her because she got all stiff and went to her own table. Emily gave me her new number and told me if I ever needed anything or wanted to talk, not to hesitate to contact her, and I thanked her because I genuinely appreciated that she had been honest with me about everything. A couple weeks later, Emily contacted me because she needed help with something tech-related, She had bought a laptop at the store where I used to work before switching to the factory. He did some time in retail, a story for another day, and wanted to know about the warranty or something. I told her to come by my place and I'd help her figure it out. And when she came, she also brought Brian, her dad, which was a bit awkward at first, but he was super nice as always. We ended up going to lunch, the three of us at a restaurant near my house, and it was nice to have a normal conversation with them. Brian asked me about my factory job and Emily told me about her plans to go to college. But then when we were finishing eating, Heather showed up out of nowhere. Apparently, Emily had accidentally told her where we were, not on purpose according to what she explained to me later. But Heather came and literally knelt down next to my chair in the restaurant, crying and begging me to give her another chance, telling me her son needed a father figure, and she knew I would be an amazing father. People in the restaurant were looking at us, and I felt more uncomfortable than ever in my life. I told her, "Heather, please get up. This isn't appropriate," but she just kept crying and clinging to my arm. Brian had to get up and literally carry her out of there because she wouldn't move, and I took the opportunity to pay quickly and leave. Emily sent me like 100 messages afterwards apologizing, saying she didn't know Heather was going to do that. And I believed her because Emily had always been honest with me. I told her not to worry, that it wasn't her fault, but that it was probably better if we didn't see each other for a while because clearly my presence was causing problems in her family. I thought after that disaster at the restaurant Heather would finally get the message, but no. A couple days later Beverly called me again. I have no idea where she got my number this time, but she had it, and basically yelled at me for like 10 minutes about how I was a selfish, heartless person who was abandoning her daughter when she needed me most. I told her, "Beverly, your daughter cheated on me. The baby isn't mine. I have no responsibility here." But she kept yelling that I had been part of the family, and families don't abandon each other. I reminded her that it was she who destroyed the relationship by introducing Heather to the other guy based on absurd assumptions about my sister, and that if anyone was to blame for the current situation, it was her, not me. She got hysterical, started screaming all kinds of things at me, called me horrible names, said I was a loser with no future working at a dirty factory. And I simply hung up because I wasn't going to keep listening to that. I blocked her again from my new number, blocked Heather too just in case, and thought that would be the definitive end of all this craziness. I was completely wrong. Last week, literal last week, I was at work at the factory. It was like 2 in the afternoon and I was at my station doing my normal shift when one of my supervisors came and told me, "Marcus, there's someone at reception asking for you, says it's a family emergency." My heart stopped because I thought something had happened to my mom or someone in my actual family. So I ran to reception, and when I got there was Beverly, standing in the middle of my workplace reception with Heather's kid in her arms. The woman started making a scene in front of all my coworkers, yelling that I was the baby's father and I was evading my responsibilities, that I was a coward who abandoned his family. I was in total shock, like I couldn't believe this was actually happening. I told her, "Beverly, you need to leave now. This is my workplace." But she kept yelling. The receptionist called security, and 2 guards came, and they had to physically escort her out of the building while she kept yelling that I was a bad father and a bad man. My supervisor took me to his office and asked me what the hell was going on, and I had to explain the whole situation to him, the complete story from 2019. And thank God he was understanding and told me not to worry, that he'd make sure Beverly was on the banned list from entering the property. But the damage was already done. Everyone at the factory had now witnessed that spectacle, and even though most of my coworkers supported me, some looked at me weird. And I felt humiliated in a way I can't even describe. Emily contacted me that same day. Apparently Brian had told her what Beverly had done, and she told me her dad was seriously considering divorcing Beverly because her behavior had become completely out of control. She said Beverly was obsessed with the idea of me coming back to Heather and helping raise the kid. That somehow in her twisted head, I was the solution to all the problems she herself had created. Emily told me she was so sorry for everything, that her family was falling apart because of her mom's decisions, and that she and Brian completely understood if I wanted to cut all contact with all of them forever. I told her that she and Brian had always been good to me, and I had no problem with them. But yes, I needed distance from all this because I couldn't keep living like this. looking over my shoulder every 5 minutes, expecting Beverly to show up somewhere to make another scene. Emily told me she understood and respected my decision, and that she hoped someday, when all this calmed down, we could be friends again. So, here I am now, having changed my number again, seriously considering getting a restraining order against Beverly if she shows up again, and trying to rebuild my peace of mind that this woman almost completely destroyed. Brian apparently is proceeding with the divorce, according to what Emily told me a few days ago. Says that the last 5 years watching Beverly obsess over controlling Heather's life and now harassing me was the straw that broke the camel's back, that he can't live with someone so toxic and controlling anymore. Heather, from what I know, is dealing with being a single mother and still living with Beverly, which honestly sounds like a nightmare, but it's not my problem. The kid is now like 4 years old, and I've never met him, and have no intention of doing so, because he's literally not my son, and I have no connection to him whatsoever. Sometimes I wonder what my life would have been like if Emily hadn't shown me that pregnancy test, that Christmas Day, if I had found out after proposing, and honestly I think she saved me from making the worst mistake of my life. I'm not going to lie and say I'm completely okay with everything that happened, because I'm not. It still makes me angry to think about all the time and emotion I invested in that relationship only to find out it was all a lie. But at least now I have peace. Or at least I would if Beverly would finally give up and leave me alone once and for all. My job knows about the situation and has clear instructions to call the police if she shows up again. My family knows that if any of these people contact them, not to give them any information about me, and my friends are aware that under no circumstances should they tell them where I am or what I'm doing. The last time I talked to Emily, like 3 days ago, she told me Beverly is furious with Brian for asking for a divorce and is trying to convince Heather that all this is my fault somehow, that if I would just come back and be the kid's father, everything would go back to normal. This woman's logic is so twisted I don't even know where to start unraveling it, but honestly it's not my problem anymore. I made it clear through Emily, because she's the only one I still talk to occasionally, that if any of them contact me again or show up in my life, I'm going to take legal action immediately. No warnings, no second chances. Part of me feels a little sorry for Heather, because at the end of the day she was manipulated by her own mother and made terrible decisions based on false information. But at the same time she's an adult who decided to cheat on me instead of just talking to me about what her mom was telling her. If she had come to me and said, "Hey, my mom says you're cheating on me with this girl from the photos," we would have cleared everything up in 2 seconds. I would have properly introduced her to Jasmine as my sister, and none of this would have happened. But she didn't. She chose to believe her mom and cheat on me, and now she has to live with the consequences of that decision. Yesterday, I was at the supermarket buying stuff for dinner, and an older lady approached me in the cereal aisle and asked if I was the guy who had dated her niece years ago. At first, I got scared thinking it was some relative of Beverly's or something, but it turned out to be the aunt of a friend from college, someone completely unrelated to all this drama. She asked me how I was, and I said, "Good, working and living my life quietly," and she said, "That's all we can do, right? Keep moving forward." And she's right. That's all I can do. Keep moving forward and hope that eventually Beverly gets tired of her crusade and finds something else to focus on that isn't ruining my life. I don't know how all this is going to end. If Beverly is finally going to accept that I'm not coming back to her daughter, or if she's going to keep being a constant presence of craziness in my life. What I do know is, I'm not going to give in. I'm not going to let them manipulate me, or make me feel guilty for something I didn't do, and a responsibility that isn't mine. I spent too much time working to rebuild my life after they destroyed it the first time, and I'm not going to let that happen again. I guess at the end of the day, all I can do is keep my boundaries firm, keep living my life the best I can, and trust that eventually all this drama is going to end once and for all.